Hi, I'm Heather Hakel, and I'd like to talk to you about 18th century colonial dress. I used to work at Colonial Williamsburg in my 20s, and I was in costumes. This is an example of what I would wear for every day. I worked at the Margaret Hunter Millinery Shop. I would have my cap on. Pearls were fine to wear. This is the interior of the Margaret Hunter Millinery Shop, and this is where I had the wide side hoops or paniers. Here are some modeling shots I did for some different outfits that were handmade at the Margaret Hunter Millinery Shop. We hand stitched everything. This is a panier, small panier dress, and the ruffles were to hide the elbows. We had beautiful caps. Those were for fashion. Fans were always an accessory, and you could add interest with bows at the top of the cap or around your throat for a little added fun. This is an amazing gown that was handmade, hand stuffed with wool. Each of these little channels were stuffed with wool, and these had the very wide paniers. The interesting thing about paniers is they had a hole in them, a hole in the skirt and a hole in the panier, so they were like large pockets. This is a cap that had kissing strings, and those were just very long lace strings that came off of the cap, and it was said that if you had an admirer, they would grab hold of those kissing strings and pull you toward them and steal a kiss. The side curls were very fashionable. Makeup was very natural, except they had very red lips, very red cheeks, and you could do a little kohl around your eyes. And the décolletage was very low, but your elbows and your ankles were very risque. Here's another shot of how wide that dress was, and this was a little bit more demure. This was in front of a colonial trade shop, and this is all at Colonial Williamsburg in the Gardens. This is a beautiful dress. I have a big picture of this that I'll show you, and this is in the Palace Gardens, and this was more like a tea frock. And you can see the cap on this is very flat, and the caps were just for fashion. They weren't really a modesty piece or anything like that. It was just fashion. So the more interesting caps you had, the more interesting your fashion. Here is a framed portrait of that beautiful tea garden dress, and there are no side hoops on that. But again, the pockets had holes, so you just slide down. You could have your pocket separate and showing outside, or it could be underneath. I have a fan and I have a little pouch purse in that, and again, the little tiny little topper cap. So this would be going to someone's house for the afternoon, someone very important, or for a tea garden. This is a large picture of the very wide gown, and I think you can see the kissing strings on that cap a little bit more. That was a magnificent gown. Now we'll talk about some undergarments. Here's some 18th century illustrations, and you see, especially in this one, the man pulling on the stays and the woman grasping onto the bedpost. And these were backlacing stays, so you needed someone to help you get into them. The stays that I made for myself that I will be showing on my daughter are front lacing, so you could get in and out of them yourself. So it depended on what you wanted. The look of the 18th century was not the Scarlett O'Hara hourglass shape. It was more of a barrel shape. It was very triangular, kind of round in front, and pushed everything up. Here's an example of a very interesting lady with all of her under trimmings on. So this was her shift. These are her side hoops or panniers. These are her stays. This is again her shift. She has her hair coiffed and her little cap on, and she's putting on her makeup and her lovely shoes and stockings. When I was in Colonial Williamsburg, I designed a gown that fit me, and I was given the task of taking this picture. I don't know if you can see it very well, but we had some beautiful striped silk, and we found this. It was a later 18th century illustration of a striped silk gown. So I was given the task of designing one that could use the silk that we had and kind of mimic this. So this is my drawing, a copy of my drawing that I came up with, that I designed. I had a little pouch to go with it. She had a lovely feather, the side curls, and this is the underskirt, and this is the over part, and a great big bow right there. So I had my gown actually in a book, which is in the McCord Library right now, called Historic Communities, Colonial Crafts. And I don't know if you can see it very well, but it was on display for quite some time. I'm sure they still have it. It was all hand sewn. This is the interior of the Margaret Hunter Millinery Shop. This is an interpreter there, and that's my gown. Here are some more shots of my gown. And this is the big bow in front. These are the ruchings. It was very pretty. And from the book, this was another interpreter interpreting my gown right there, and it's in the big display case. These were fashion dolls. All the fashions came from England and France, so they would send over, instead of big huge gowns, they would send over little tiny dolls with the latest fashions. And the milliners did not just do hats, they would also sew the gowns. That was the most important thing that they did. Any trimmings, laces, getting your gown sewn, doing the hats, everything, that was the milliner. Another fun thing I did in Colonial Williamsburg, I don't know if you remember, but Roy Underhill was the woodwright, and he was on PBS for many, many seasons. I do believe there are some reruns of him. This is a book, The Woodwright's Eclectic Workshop. We do not have it at McCord. It might still be in print, but I did some very interesting things for him. I modeled an everyday look, and that's in the book, page 85. So that's me in my 20s. I have the side curls. This is a ladder he made for a library, and it kind of slid along the side. I have an everyday dress. It's dressed up with the lace and the ruching at the bottom. I have a beautiful pinny apron, and basically you would pin it in the front, and that would dress up any everyday outfit. Another fun thing that I did for Roy Underhill's, I was in a commercial, a nationwide commercial. It's still on YouTube. You can look up Roy Underhill's Woodwright Shop commercials. This was making bricks. So the three of us were all dressed up in our finery, and of course we were in the mud squishing bricks. After I interpreted and was in front of the community, I decided to go behind the scenes and get more involved with the construction. So here are some things that I did in the costume design shop, which was behind the scenes, and we basically designed all of the clothing and sewed them for the interpreters, unless it was hand sewn in the millinery shop. So these are just some examples. This is just a basic everyday shirt. This is the equivalent of everyday for a woman. It would be the breeches, the stockings, the waistcoat, and this would be the overcoat. Another wonderful thing I did for Colonial Williamsburg is I got the chance to work at Monticello and make a duplicate of Thomas Jefferson's coat that's still on display there. We got to actually touch and examine the original frock coat and measure it exactly, make a pattern exactly, use as close to the same exact materials as possible, and hand stitched it. So it is at Monticello right now on display, which is very neat.
see my daughter, Abigail, wearing a shift, which is your very, very first layer. You would need to keep your elbows covered and, of course, your knees. She is wearing stockings. They were white if she wasn't doing anything very dirty, and blue if you were going to be scrubbing the floors. She's going to be wearing an everyday look. This is the first layer for a man. It's his shirt. It's the equivalent of a shift for a woman. Her first layer after the shift, oh my, is the corset. And these are called stays in the 18th century. And I made these myself. Everything she's wearing, I made for myself. And I made her or myself front lacing stays. And that's because you can get in and out of them yourself. If they were back lacing stays, you would need help. So, yes, it was cumbersome. You would start from the bottom and work your way up. But it gave you that great barrel shape we were all looking for in the 18th century. And just again, kind of flattened everything out, made you have a nice triangular shape, and lifted everything else. And they were actually very comfortable. You didn't have to stand up yourself, the stays stood up for you. You'll note the ruffles on her shift as she raises her arms. That was an added feature for dressing it up if you wanted. They would show underneath the gown. Also, there are ruffles at her neck, and shifts did not usually have to have that. But this is just for pretty. So there she is in her stockings, shift, and stays. This is the skirt, the underskirt, and you will see that it is slit on the sides. That's for easy access to pockets because pockets were not part of the gown. So there are pleats that show you the front and the back, and you tie them over your stays. And they could be anything. They could be silk, they could be cotton. Cotton was very expensive at the time, linen was cheap. So this is a cotton skirt. Even for everyday dress, this would be very fashionable. It's a polished cotton. And then you just tie them on the sides. And there are little openings on each side again to access your pockets or the panniers, which I will show you in a moment. And Abby has her fashionable side curls and just very minimal makeup, as was the fashion at that point. And there she is, reaching into the side to get that pocket. And speaking of pockets, oops, these are the big ones. These are the paniers, or they're baskets in French, and they are side hoops, which gives you that wonderful wide look. My father made these for me out of tomato steaks, and then I sewed the muslin over them. So that will definitely make an entrance in any room. People will move out of the way when they see you, and you could actually store your lunch in there. They are large. But for everyday dress, we will not be using the panniers. This is the pocket, which I made to be very fashionable, so it could be made to be seen. If you had just an everyday pocket, you could put it under your gown, tie it on first, and the gown could go over. But this one is just beautiful, so we're going to let it show. And if you remember the nursery rhyme, Lucy Locket lost her pocket, Kitty Fisher found it. Well, how in the world could you lose your pocket? They're sewn in. Well, in the 18th century, they were not. So if your string broke, you would lose your pocket. This would be a lovely outfit if you were just outside and working in the garden. This is the equivalent of the first layer or the second layer for a man. These are the breeches. And so for the woman, it would be the underskirt. For the man, it would be the breeches. And the back, they lace. So if you gained or lost any weight, you could expand them. The buttons were handmade at the foundry in Colonial Williamsburg. They're pewter buttons from an original 18th century cast. And I'm telling right there that she could wear this, as I said, for gardening or just running errands. With the stays and the shift, it's perfectly acceptable. But if it were a little cold, as Abby showed you, you could add the top, the layer that goes over that. And again, this is just for everyday look. This is called a jacket for a girl. And this is authentic Colonial Williamsburg fabric that they use for their jackets there. You would pull the ruffles of the shift underneath so that they showed. Definitely let your ruffles at the top show. The more ruffles and ruching and lace you had, the more expensive you look, the more, oh, fashionable the piece would be. So you could just let it hang like that if it were really hot, or you could add a beautiful apron. You could tuck it in underneath the skirt if you didn't want to wear an apron. Aprons weren't just practical in the 18th century, they were also fashion. So we're going to add an apron so she doesn't lose that beautiful 18th century silhouette. We are adding for the man's equivalent a waistcoat or waistcoat. It was pronounced waistcoat at that time. Again, the pewter buttons. So the equivalent of her jacket would be the waistcoat for a man. And this is just everyday dress for a man. For fancy, it would be silk, it would be embroidered, it would be just as fancy as a woman's. So now we are adding the apron. This is a half apron. You could have a pinny apron, which you would actually pin to the front and it would go all the way up, or you could have a half apron. So we're going to remove the pocket so as to place it outside of the apron to show it off again because it is so very pretty. And this is a lace apron. So she wouldn't really be working in the garden with this one on. This one would be for fashion if she were going to meet friends and show off her fine embroidery that she learned at home. So now we can see that the stays are giving her the shape now with that cinched to her waist. We're going to add the pocket on top again so she could access her coins or little notes or whatever and show it off. Ideally, she would have made it herself, stitched it, and again shown her skill with the needle. But now there's more. The caps. Caps were more of an accessory than a modesty piece. It was not necessary to cover your hair at that time. You did not have to, but it was fashion. This was called a mob cap because it was simply a circle that was gathered and easy to wear. The mobs or the masses could wear them. This one was a more fashionable linen cap. I handmade this as well as all of the rest of the things she's wearing, and it had a bigger back, nice and full, beautiful ruffles around the front. You could also dress up your outfit more with a little ribbon around your neck. This is a beautiful blue one to match the blue in the skirt. You could wear black. Pearls were often worn for dress up. You could have a pearl on a ribbon, but that just added to the prettiness of the outfit. The last thing you would wear before you went out was your hat. I made this one for myself in Colonial Williamsburg, and I just love it. It would go way down low, so you could be modest and hide a bit, and you would tie it jauntily to the side. Um, Definitely let your side curls show. And it was beautiful. It stood up in the back, had little violets on it, millinery violets, and green velvet ribbon. So her look is complete for the day. Any colonial woman going shopping would need her basket and a cover so no one would see what she is shopping.
So, jaunty. And this is a child's hat, and to dress up a man's hat, this is a half cock, and this is a cockade. Whee! So this is the cockade right there to dress it up, and and so this is a tri-corner hat or a three-cocked hat. This is for a little boy, so you would dress it up like that.